Hello, boys and girls. Are you sitting comfortably? Whatever answer you just gave, we'll begin. I talk about new trains and new rail services a fair bit on this channel, and inevitably there are some complaints about whatever it is I'm talking about. Some of these you can dismiss because they come from the sort of people who just like to complain or have an irrelevant axe to grind. But some are worth listening to, not least because they come from, well, everyone. The most consistent complaint I hear about new trains, diesel or electric or battery, fast or slow, is that the seats are uncomfortable. The term I hear a lot is ironing boards. Now personally, I'm a fairly ascetic person when it comes to furniture. Maybe I was a monk in a past life or something. But normal people like a bit of comfort. In fact, according to a 2023 Rail Safety and Standards Board survey, 66% of passengers reported some level of dissatisfaction. So why are seats on trains so uncomfortable these days? Well, first of all, we're going to do a little dive into history because that's what I do around here. The earliest railway carriages were basically stagecoaches on rails. First class was comfortable enough by the standards of the early 19th century. Things got progressively worse for second and third class passengers. In fact, on early third class carriages, you were lucky if you got a roof, let alone cushions. Look at this replica 1830s carriage of the Great Western Railway. The seats are just planks. The early railway companies frankly did not want to carry third class passengers, and were it not for the government insisting on it, they probably wouldn't have done. Soon, Britain was absolutely covered with railway track, including many duplicate routes, and this led the railways to compete against each other. One of the most competitive services was from London to Edinburgh. The Midland Railway had the most arduous route, and it was a relative latecomer compared to the other companies. So they decided to be sneaky. They couldn't compete on speed, but they could compete on comfort. So in 1875 they abolished second class. Well, kind of. They scrapped their third class coaches, redesignated their second class coaches as third class, and reduced the price of first class fares. I know, cheaper and more comfortable trains? It really was a different time. Third class coaches of the late 19th and early 20th century made today's first class coaches look cheap. Well, the Glasgow subway here is an exception, but those passengers were going off to work in the shipyards. They didn't care about 10 minutes of numb buttocks. That aside, even when costs were being cut, seats remained relatively comfortable. This coach is a British Railways Mark II. These were mass-produced coaches designed at a time when British Railways was expected to turn a profit and looking to cut costs. Or take these coaches from 1972, still in service on the Bakerloo line of the London Underground. They aren't luxurious, the seats are definitely showing their age, but they are at least yielding. These are not ironing boards. That being said, I've seen some complaints that London Underground doesn't have the hard plastic seats that you get on systems like the New York subway, so remember, things could always be worse. At a time when fares are quite ludicrously high, argue passengers, it's a bit much. There are two authorities in charge of determining how pleasant your posterior feels at the end of a train ride. Firstly, the Department for Transport, who set the standards. And secondly, the train operating company, who have to implement them on their trains. So how are modern seats justified? Well, it turns out that there's a science to this. There are many factors that go into designing a modern seat that were less of a priority back in the day, or were just not considered. One is space. On trains, particularly commuter trains, you need space for people to stand and for people to move. Make the seats too wide and they can't do that. This is why on intensively used commuter services like the London Underground, they prefer to put the seats sideways. Actually, I've heard it said that the ideal train for heavily used commuter routes would have no seats at all, but I have no idea where I heard that, so, take that with a pinch of salt. By the same token, the angle of seat backs adds up. A few degrees of tilt increases the amount of space a seat takes up, and that all adds up to, again, reduce capacity. Another factor is weight. We as passengers tend not to think about these things, but the heavier a seat is, the harder the train has to work, the more power it uses. Again, one individual seat probably isn't going to affect things much, but consider how many hundreds of seats are in every train. So seats need to take weight into consideration. A third is safety. The seat needs to be, as far as possible, fireproof. Unfortunately, many of the things that make a seat more comfortable are also dangerous in the event of a fire. I'm thinking particularly here of foam padding, which is often highly inflammable and burns with toxic smoke. Deeply unpleasant. Fourth, durability. Consider how busy a typical train gets. It's got to carry potentially thousands of people, day in, day out, from the early morning to late at night. A commuter train has it really hard. Passengers will be getting up and sitting down all the time. Those seats are going to see a lot of use in their lifetime. Therefore, seats are designed to be hard-wearing. They're expected to last at least 5 years before replacement. And then, perhaps the overarching factor, cost. Not only do the seats have to be safe, space-efficient, lightweight and durable, but they have to be affordable. Thousands of seats that meet all the essential criteria and also have the comfort of an armchair would cost a fortune. And let's be honest, whether you're appeasing shareholders or taxpayers, someone's going to complain if you spend more money than you need to. I would also argue that railways don't have to compete with each other in the way they used to, so one TOC can't steal a march over another by saying, "We're the ones with the more comfortable seats." Airlines tend to have a bit more money to play with, and that's why your long-haul plane flight will be more comfortable than your Elizabeth Line train to Heathrow Airport. I know that's not directly relevant here, but if I don't mention it, someone in the comments section will. Designing a seat is a more complex process than most people appreciate, and I include myself in most people. I knew basically nothing about it until I started researching this video. But one of the difficulties is that it's really hard to know how a seat will behave in use. Under lab conditions, it's basically impossible to simulate all the years of abuse a train seat will go through. Even asking people's opinions isn't always a reliable means of figuring it out, because, say, your tired and stressed out commuter at the end of a long day in the office will interpret things differently to your test subject who's just here for a sit down with a bunch of people in white coats. When it comes down to it, life is a lot more complicated than it used to be. We have more technology and more regulations, but we also have less money to throw around. That's what lies at the bottom of it all. Well, I do hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please do leave a like and consider subscribing for more. I would like as ever to thank my donors on Ko-fi and Patreon and here on YouTube for your generous support. You are the maquette to my cushions. And I will see you all again very soon. Cheerio.